Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be using two new stamp sets that I designed for Simon Says Stamp, and I'll get into those when we get farther into the video. But for now, I wanted to let you know that this is the third video in my mini series on color mixing with watercolors. So I'm going to be showing you some more color mixing over on the side in this split screen. And the first thing I've done is I've wet my watercolor paper with clean, clear water. I just want that to be nice and wet while I mix some colors, and then I'll add those in a minute. Starting out with a nice coral shade, or kind of like an orange yellow. I'm going to add a tiny bit of blue to that, since blue is the complementary color to orange. And it's going to just dull that back a little bit. I really love that particular color combo for a nice warm coral shade. And then I took some yellow and added a tiny, tiny bit of purple to make that more of a golden yellow. And to the same puddle of paint, I added a little bit of red to make this more of an intense red coral. So I just dropped that onto that wet watercolor paper, and because the paper was already wet, all those edges really softened out and mixed and melded together. Used my heat tool to dry that piece, and then I set it aside. I have another piece of watercolor paper here, and I've prepped it with the powder tool, and now I've taken images from the More Spring Flowers stamp set, and I'm stamping that in Versamark ink. I'm going to be adding some Hero Arts white embossing powder on top, and then melting that embossing powder, and that's going to leave me with some nice strong white lines that as I paint over the top, it's going to resist the paint, and then I'll have a nice clean line. That'll make more sense once you start see me painting. So I'm sprinkling on that embossing powder, and then I'm hitting that with a heat tool and melting all of that powder until it's smooth and glossy. I stamped an additional large flower, so I've taped all of my pieces down onto my hardboard here, and now I'm going to start painting one of the flowers. This first flower that I'm painting, I'm going to mix two pools or puddles of color. The first is going to be red and purple. It's going to lean more toward purple than red. And I'm using a size 10 round brush, which is a little bit larger than I'll actually be painting with, because I want to make sure I have a nice big pool of color to work with. I don't want to run out of this color. So just added some purple to that. It's a nice dark red purple. And then I'm going to mix another shade, and this is going to be the lighter shade for this flower. Started out with some red, and I'm building up that pool of color because I want to make sure I have a nice big pool of color just like I have for the purple. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit of purple to this just to get it to be a little bit more of the same shade, kind of just a lighter version of that darker shade that I've mixed. But it's still looking a tiny bit too purple, so I will add a little more red and kind of even out the color, because I do want it to be sort of like a pink shade, and then the purple will be what I use to start shading everything. So I'm going to use a small paintbrush. This is a size 4 silver brush round. Let's see, it's a silver black velvet size 4 round brush. It's a really long name. And I'm just dropping in some of that color, and then I'm coming in with the purple shade, and I'm dropping that in while that pink color is still wet. I've cleaned off my brush a little bit and just kind of softening those edges. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint the rest of the flower the same way. So the watercolor paper I'm using today is from Fabriano. This is one of their cold press papers, and I believe it's an extra white. I think that's what they call it. And I wanted to use this paper in particular because these inexpensive paints will dry back quite a bit. They'll be very, very soft once they're dry. And so I wanted to have them on a brighter white paper for this. I knew I could put it on, some regular cold press paper, which has more of a cream color, but I really wanted that stark contrast between the colors and the paper, especially since I'm using white embossing powder. So for the next flower, I'm going to be focusing more on kind of an orange coral yellow color scheme. So I'm starting out with some red, and I'm mixing a nice big pool of color. So when you guys are painting, you want to make sure that if you're going to be painting a large area, or if you're planning to use that color throughout your painting, go ahead and mix a lot of color. If you end up not using it, you can let it dry on the palette and pick it up later. You can use it in other ways, or you can clean up, because really your paints go a long way. They'll last you a long, long time. So I've mixed some red with orange, and then I wanted it to be a little lighter, so I added some yellow. And then I'm going to make the darker shade that I'll be shading this flower with. And I'm starting out with red, and I'm making sure I have a nice big pool of color, just like I did with the previous 3 colors that I've mixed. And I'm adding a ton of red up there. So I want this red to be a slightly darker shade than what it is right now. So I will end up adding just a tiny bit of green to both dull it out and also darken it just a tiny bit. So I'm cleaning off my brush there off camera, bringing in a little bit of that green. I'll grab some more. And I'm liking how this color is looking. So I'm going to go ahead and start painting. I'm once again going to switch to that size 4 round brush, and I'll drop in the lighter shade. This is just like a nice warm kind of dulled back orange. It's a little bit of a coral shade. Adding in some of that red, just dropping it into those colors where there would be a little bit of shading. And I will come back to this flower eventually, because I realized that I didn't have as much contrast between these 2 colors as I did on the purple flower. And you'll see that in a minute when you see them side by side. So you can see on that purple flower, there's quite a bit of color difference. And I didn't like that there wasn't as much color difference on the other flower. So I will come back to that eventually. Cleaned off my palette just with a wet rag or baby wipe. And now I'm going to mix some color for the leaves. And there's lots of leaves. And I was thinking, instead of having it be more green, I thought it would be kind of fun to have them be more of a blue-green color, and then have the darker shade be like a dark blue navy shade. I thought that'd be kind of fun, a little bit unexpected. There are leaves out there that are these colors. You don't see them quite as often, but I've seen a lot of watercolor paintings online or in watercolor classes where the artist mixes in kind of like this blue aqua shade with the leaves. And I thought it was just so beautiful. So I'm going to try to kind of mimic that kind of color combination today. So I'm mixing just blue and green together because I really want to get that shade going. And it's leaning more toward blue to me more than green. So now I'm going to clean off my brush, and then I'm going to make another pile of color. Actually, just kidding, I'm not. I'm adding a little orange. I'm dulling that back just a little bit. Okay, there we go. I'm wiping off my brush, making sure I'm getting all that color out of the brush. And now I'm going to start another pool of color. Starting out with that blue. Like I said, I want this to be sort of like a dark navy color. So I'm going to have lots and lots of blue up there in that section of my palette. Cleaning off my brush. And then I'm going to come back and grab a tiny bit of orange. This is going to dull back the blue. It's going to darken it a little bit. And it's going to give me a nice shade to start painting with. Add a little more blue to that so it doesn't read so dark. And then I'm going to grab my smaller paintbrush once again and go in to paint the leaves. Once again, I'm starting with the lighter shade, and I'm just dropping in all that color, and then I'll take the darker shade and drop that in while it's still wet. I'm going to go ahead and paint all of these leaves right now, all of these leaves on the one side. I'll drop in that darker blue color. I really love how these 2 colors kind of mix together, and the blue seems a little bit unexpected, but I also knew that these colors would fade back quite a bit as they dry, so they wouldn't be so blue in the long run, if that makes sense. So I'm dropping in more of that color on this really long stem of leaves, and then I'll drop in the darker blue. So don't be afraid to kind of mix some colors that might be a little bit unexpected. You might be surprised how well they look together. So like I said before, this flower was looking a little bit anemic to me. It didn't have enough color change between the lighter shade and the darker shade. So I thought it would be smart to add a little more color in here. So I've mixed a darker, more kind of dull red, mixing quite a bit of green into that red to make it a little darker. And then I'm going to go back in and start painting in some darker areas. So I'm just dropping in, and I actually didn't add the shading everywhere on the flower. There were a few petals where I decided just to not worry about it, but I did want to have a little bit more shading, especially in the center of the flower where all those petals are all scrunched up. So now I'm using the coordinating die set that goes with the stamp set, and I'm placing them all onto the watercolor piece and then taping them with some blue painter's tape. And I'm making sure that the blue painter's tape is taping the die to the paper and avoiding that painted area in the center. Sometimes when you're taping dies down, it can kind of tear the actual colored area in the center. So I like to make sure I'm taping only the die to the outside of the area. I then cut down that background that I painted earlier to a size of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and then adhered all of the leaves down onto it. Kind of arranged the flowers and the leaves, and then adhered the leaves first because they were on the bottom layer, and then put some foam tape on these flowers. Okay, so my original plan was to stamp my greeting on that yellow background piece, but I had a mishap with some embossing powder, and it looks sort of okay. You can see it on the side of the screen, but I was really not loving it. So I decided that I would perform some card surgery and salvage what I'd already created. So I used a ruler and a craft knife just to cut those pieces off, and then I changed my card base to a smoke cardstock color from Simon Says Stamp. I wanted this kind of mid-tone gray to be the background. So I put that in my Misty stamping tool. I've arranged where I'm putting my greeting, and then I'm stamping that greeting in Versamark ink. And this is going to keep it really sticky so that I can apply some embossing powder. So I'm going to use some more white embossing powder. This is Hero Arts white embossing powder once again. And I've heat set that until it was smooth and melted. And then I added some adhesive on the back of my watercolor piece and adhered that down onto my card. And just to finish it off, because it was looking a little stark up at the top, I'm going to take a white gel pen. This is a Uniball Signo Broad white gel pen, and I added some dash lines around the outside of the card. So that's basically the card for today. This is actually part of a blog hop for Simon Says Stamp, so make sure you head over to my blog to see lots more inspiration from this latest release. Thanks so much for watching today, and I will catch you guys in the next video.